It's 1981. I'm living in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm, at the time, an aspiring playwright. I'm married to Rose. Rose is wonderful, but she comes with baggage. Her mother, FREDA, my mother-in-law. FREDA is about 5 feet tall, piercing blue eyes, hair dyed strawberry blonde. She walks straight at you like a little bull, except she wobbles from side to side, like she's carrying a heavy shopping bag in each hand. Usually, she is. FREDA lives in Winnipeg, but she visits Rose and me in Vancouver. She comes often. She stays a week, sometimes longer. I work at home. FREDA is always there, making tea, sipping tea, offering tea. She's old. She's an immigrant. Her English is horrible. She's my mother-in-law, not worth a second thought, until one rainy Vancouver afternoon. I'm working in the dining room on a radio play. It's about heroes and heroism, about swords and dragons. I have a lot to say about heroes and heroism. I have a lot to say about swords and dragons. I'm a young man. I'm callow and arrogant. I know everything. FREDA comes into the dining room where I work. She offers me some tea, but I'm in the midst of inspiration. I don't want to lose that thought. The future of Canadian playwriting could depend on that thought. And so I'm rude, abrupt. FREDA, can't you see? I'm working, okay? FREDA takes her tea and goes into the living room. I feel bad. I follow her into the living room. FREDA stares at me with those blue eyes. She says nothing, as if deciding something very important about me. Then she starts yakking. She rambles on in broken English, a mixture of English and Yiddish and Polish and Russian and God knows how many languages. She rambles on for hours. I force myself to listen. I try to put the pieces together. FREDA is a young woman in Poland in 1939 when the Nazis invade. Her husband is killed by the Nazis. She's left with a 2-year-old daughter. FREDA flees east into the Soviet Union, which at that time is not at war with Germany. But later, when Germany invades the Soviet Union, FREDA flees further east and south. She's a refugee, always in fear of her life, always on the run, always hungry. She ends up in Uzbekistan. There, she lives in a tent and sleeps on the hard, dry ground and begs for food from strangers. The Soviets, worried about all the refugees in their southern republic, round them up and herd FREDA and her daughter into a cattle car and ship them like livestock, thousands upon thousands of miles north and east to Siberia. In Siberia, they put FREDA and her daughter in a camp with barbed wire and guards with rifles and barracks with thin wood walls that let in the cold. FREDA and her daughter spend 4 years in that cold, dark land, waiting for the war to end. And when it does, they're shipped thousands of miles west, across all of Siberia and Russia to Germany. And there, they're put in another camp. But this time, it's a DP camp, a camp for displaced persons. And in that camp, FREDA meets a man, and she marries that man in that very camp. And 2 years later, a child is born, a boy, my brother-in-law, Joe. And then after that, they manage to arrive in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Yes, where they begin a new life. And sometime later, my wife, Rose, is born. But then, FREDA's husband dies, and there is never another man in her life. And FREDA raises 3 children on her own in a strange land. And this is FREDA's life to the moment she tells me her story in broken English on that gray, rainy Vancouver afternoon. I try to digest what FREDA told me. I try to put all the pieces together, to decide what to say, how to act. But I really don't have the time. I have a play to write. I have the future of Canadian playwriting to think about. And so, without a word, FREDA takes her tea and goes into the spare bedroom to lie down, exhausted by her story. I go back to the dining room, to my play, but I can't work. Something is eating at me. I think, or I sense, some piece is missing from FREDA's story. Rose had told me about her father and about FREDA's first husband, but the rest of what I learned that afternoon was new to me. And as FREDA told me the story of her life and her family's life, her brother who played an imaginary violin, relatives who lived in Warsaw who were extras in the movie business, strangers she met in Uzbekistan, families she lived with in the barracks in Siberia. As she told me the story of her life and the life of all the families she met on her 6-year odyssey, one word kept repeating itself again and again and again. Toit. Toit. I kept hearing that word. Toit. Toit, toit, toit. I didn't know what it meant. And so when Rose came home from work, I asked her, I said, Rosie, your mother's been talking my ear off all afternoon. I didn't get any work done. She kept using this word toit. What does it mean? And Rose looked at me and she took me in and she said, Sherman, toit means dead in Yiddish. The 3 of us had dinner that evening, but I wasn't hungry. And I noticed FREDA's blue eyes trying to catch my glance, but I couldn't do it. As I played with my food, I avoided FREDA's glance, and slowly, what I had heard that afternoon began to make its way through the hard shell of my arrogance and naivete. I like doing dishes. I love doing dishes. In fact, the reason for that is I have, as a man and a playwright, my most creative, most insightful thoughts with my hands in hot, soapy water. And so that night, like every other night, I did the dishes, and I thought. But I didn't think about my play. And after I had my long think, and after the dishes were done and put away, and after the towels were hung on the rack, and after the counter was wiped so clean that it sparkled, I put the kettle on, and I made some tea, and I brought it to FREDA in the living room, and I sat down beside her, and we sipped our tea together. FREDA knew I didn't respect her. She wanted me to respect her and her life, and so she told me her story, and stereotypes crumbled. I saw FREDA as she truly was, not as an old immigrant woman, not as my mother-in-law, but as a woman of great courage, of indomitable spirit. And FREDA and I developed over the years a wonderful, deep relationship, so deep and rewarding that now, more than 20 years after her death, I still speak of her with love and affection, and try to do justice to her memory. Young men worship heroes. Heroes carry swords and slay dragons. FREDA's story changed that as well. I realized that some heroes don't carry swords, but slay dragons nonetheless. Sometimes a dragon slayer is a little Polish Jewish woman who walks right at you carrying a shopping bag in each hand, a little bull of a woman who prevails over everything that life can throw at her. It's over 30 years since I heard that story on that gray, rainy Vancouver afternoon. I don't know if people are like wine, if we get better with age, but I do know with certainty that I am no longer that arrogant, know-it-all brat that I was so many years ago. And I'm certain as well, and maybe everyone here knows this, but it's worth repeating, I'm certain as well that whatever wisdom I have gained in my life, it began with listening to other people's stories.